Christianity and rock and roll have kind of had these odds against one another, which I have no idea why. You know, rock and roll is not the devil's music. I didn't get in this to rebel. I was rebelling against rebellion.
The subject of today's Metal Mythos is criminally underrated in two musical phylums, derided among metalheads for their Christianity.
Stryper has rocked the gospel into the hearts of a godless world. Their testimony is next on Behind the Music That Sucks.
Reviled among Christians for being a dispensary of the devil's music.
You would really think that the church would be fully supportive, see what God is doing, but it wasn't all roses, was it?
Well, you know, Jimmy Swaggart back in the day held up our album and basically said that we were wolves in sheep's clothing.
I'll never stop playing that rock and roll. I've got a message that must be told. He's the rock and he makes me roll. I don't care if I ever make the radio. That's blasphemy.
But I want you to do me a favor. Left, right, center, Jesus freak and circus freak alike. Put it all aside. And let's discuss something very few ever do. The peerless metalwork of the band themselves. The actual music. Because once you peer past the hot yellow spandex and wade through the monster ballads, what you're left with is objectively one of the most important contributors to what would ultimately be known as power metal in the entirety of the 1980s. And any Christians that may have wandered in here, you've been warned up front. I say bad words, like a lot. I don't personally consider it blasphemy, as propriety and etiquette are a societal standard, not biblical doctrine, the very same societal standards that allowed O.J. Simpson to skate on double homicide, then threw the book at him for stealing back his own shit. Long story short, I know some of you are offended by language, so if you're out there and you happen to be one of the few incensed by such verbiage, well, fucking blow me. And before the dyed in the dung metal shitlords groan, "Oh, Stryper, aren't they those Christian dildos? Oh, go back to the Bill Gaither concert. Stryper ain't Michael W. Smith. Stryper ain't DC Talk. Those are Christians that preach to other Christians. Stryper struck out into a world that despises everything they stand for, forsaking a comfy, cloistered little Christian music market where they could have printed money in perpetuity, and they fucking made it. Big time. Judge them instead against their true peers. Maiden, Priest, Dokken, because that's what the fuck they are. A band that subsists against the odds. One of the few 80s bands that sounds as tight, if not tighter, than they ever did in the ethereal hairspray-scented ether of the 1980s. Ozfox, Robert and Michael Sweet, Tim Gaines, the Yellow and Black Attack, Stryper.
He was looking for a singer, and the guys that he was going to audition weren't half as good as Michael. And my husband and myself badgered Robert for 4 months. Give your brother a chance, you know. Maybe he's not the easiest person for you to get along with, but he's a great singer.
Just one day, I thought, okay, what do I have to lose? I mean, I don't think this is going to work, but I'll sure give it a try. And it sure sounded good. It worked, and ever since then, that was the age of 14. I joined with Robert, and ever since then, we've been playing in bands together.
And so, brothers Robert and Michael Sweet formed a band, one of many in fact. The one that would ultimately be known as Stryper, like so many of the scions of Sunset Boulevard, would have multifarious permutations, but by far the most coherent of their myriad manifestations was known as Roxx Regime, with a lineup consisting not only of the classic members, but most notably C.C. DeVille of Poison. Their stage show and lyrical content was not terribly dissimilar from their contemporaries. The struggles of young love, the merits of their chosen genre, and on they sauntered down banality Boulevard. It wasn't until they cleaned up their whiskey-swilling, philandering peccadillos and committed to Christianity that the band attained their own unique lyrical style, though they were presented with a problem. We have a metric assload of love songs and no time to write new ones. The solution? Fuck it, change the chick's name to Jesus. Ooh, yeah. with the savior. But no one can argue with the metallic result, albeit with a decuman dollop of melody. Even germinating in juvenility, it was clear as crucifixion that Roxx regime, preposterous name aside, would be a force to be reckoned with in the decade to come. For my money, the Roxx regime demos, which were finally made commercially available in 2007, were the first album as it should have been recorded. Melody is all well and good. Maiden have done it. Priest have done it. Fuck, even Motorhead have waded balls deep into the mire of monster ballads. And for Lemmy, ball depth was deep indeed. But without a much-needed edge on the production front, you're more Richard Marx than Metallica. Which brings me at last to the first album.
I was just your typical rock and roll kid, playing guitar, doing drugs, and boozing, and I knew in my heart what was right. I felt that following Jesus was the right thing to do, but I just didn't want to have anybody telling me how to do it.
With a new name representing a rather forced acronym.
And I'll tell you right now, Stryper stands for salvation through redemption, yielding peace, encouragement, and righteousness. And I'm here to tell you right now, you can either accept it or reject it.
And a new look to match. The Reborn band went from strength to strength. The nomenclature was doubly handy in that it dovetailed with the Isaiah 53:5 Bible verse that states, "By his stripes we are healed," a verse the band incorporated into the logo for the foreseeable future. Stryper began a steady slog through the LA club scene that would ultimately culminate in full-blown arena tours within a 2-year period. But it all begins with the Yellow and Black Attack. Stryper's debut is an object lesson in the merits and often lack thereof of proper studio production. Look, Ponzi-ass production slobnobbery has its place. Motley Crue are up to their nads and lewds and labia, incapable of forming a coherent thought, let alone a classic song? Fuck it, hand him off to Tom Werman, he'll snatch those gold records from the jaws of inebriation.
Yeah, they were fun. They were hard. It was a hard gig. You know, to make a good album was hard.
4 months later, smack it on the ass, it's a bouncing baby shout at the devil. But with a more refined, melodically inclined metal band like Stryper, if you smooth out those rough edges, you effectively defang the cobra. Maybe the solos on one of the rockers will be a hair more pristine, such as on the savage shred fest at the climax of You Know What to Do. The prissier refrains like the sappy serenade My Love I'll Always Show, you remove the only bite the song may have otherwise boasted.
As long as I'm with you, my love I'll always show.
Insulin shot, anyone? And it's a damn shame because the original version of My Love I'll Always Show, as we've already seen, was outright exceptional. Glam metal producers would struggle and even outright dispense with this balance in the coming decade, as we got a hell of a lot of melody and very little metal going forward, but it's a shame to see a band of Stryper's pedigree fall prey to it out of the gate. No one wants hair without the metal. We tried that. It was called New Wave, and it thrives solely on the feverish consumption of cock. The Yellow and Black Attack. It ain't the demo, but it'll do. To salvage their musical bona fides from the production room floor, Stryper now found themselves in the unenviable position of not only needing to avoid the sophomore slump phenomenon, but craft a balls-out second times the charm masterpiece. But no one was prepared for what dropped next.
Black gospel music stood out with a driving beat, but even that wasn't rock and roll. Well, that's all changed now. The pop music world has been peacefully invaded by such bearers of the word as Amy Grant and Steve Taylor. And now there's even a Christian heavy metal band called Stryper.
But this is the 80s, and religious music will never be the same again.
This, my friends, is the real shit. Not merely a passable hair metal record, but if bands like Hammerfall and Halloween are being perfectly honest, a more than mild influence on the genre that would soon be known as power metal, with neck-throttling percussion, soaring operatic vocals, and twin guitar harmonies aplenty, Soldiers Under Command, to put it bluntly, is the Credibility album. Definitive proof that Stryper weren't all about perms and payola. They could A1 fucking rock, and rock they goddamn do. If the album suffers from one fatal flaw, it's the lack of overall sonic coherence. One epic proto-power pummeling here, upbeat Van Halen worship there, before promptly dive-bombing into a fetid mire of fondue dick cheese. The difference between this and the previous album is that when it breaks out the ballads, at least one of them actually fucking lands, as proven by the perma-classic First Love. Sophomore slump, bitch, I break wind at the fucking thought. Soldiers Under Command is my favorite Stryper album by a lot. It's unbalanced, and you've been warned, but you should buy that shit all the same. Soldiers Under Command was a savage, if occasionally sensitive statement from a fledgling young foursome searing with metallic energy, but fans and critics alike sensed their truly seminal statement was yet to come, and fuck if they didn't make it emphatically. But then, there's the cock-punching cover art! I mean, just look at that shit. They don't look like a rock band, let alone Christian. They look like they're about to lead John Matrix against the savage hordes of chainmail murder stash and Commando. Fucking just drink that shit in. Stryper bestraddling their yellow and black turbo tank, legs akimbo, wayfish arms brandishing a potpourri of projectile weaponry. These fuckers look like the original Expendables, and I love the living shit out of it. But not everyone did.
The greatest inconsistency in the band's image is the marriage of rock and violence appearing on their album jackets, making them look like the born-again version of Rambo.
In recent years, terminally unfunny titwanks like Metal Sucks and the like have included Soldiers Under Command on worst album art lists, but the thing about the internet is, they're cunts with bad opinions. Of course, at this early stage of their career, already broiling beneath the surface, was the critical cacophony rising to a din, purporting that the band weren't in fact Christian, or merely bad ones, because in their words, Stryper were using it as a gimmick to accrue sales.
But not everyone likes the Lord delivered in heavy metal mode. Pastor Wayne Zimmerman of Lifegate Baptist Church is one of them.
I would describe it as music of the devil.
You've described these guys as effeminate, as of gimmickry and with God, and also you've said that headbanging music is not the way to find God. Do you still stick by that?
That's right.
Have you ever heard their music?
I've heard it on television, like with the video clips.
But you never actually heard an album?
No.
Rant? Rant.
What do you say to your critics who say that you just found a new gimmick? You're a new wonderful way to make money.
Yeah, you caught them. Stryper devised the only gimmick in the world designed to prevent them from ever achieving the same level of success as their cloven-hooved compatriots. Christianity? A gimmick for money. In metal. In the 80s, the decade that gave us Shout at the Devil, Number of the Beast, and Rain in Blood. They could have pranced on stage and shouted ban all BJs and had a wider market appeal than by chucking Bibles into the piss-stinking, beer-swilling masses that attended a metal show. The hallowed halls of metalldom are rife with tales of Stryper being pelted with refuse, chased off stage at festivals by pitchfork-wielding Frankenstein villagers, and otherwise teabagged ad infinitum merely for expressing a religious opinion.
We actually had Stryper opening for us, that was a whole, they go on stage and they're throwing Bibles into the crowd, and this is an Anthrax audience, and they're up there like tossing Bibles out into the audience, and the Bibles are coming back, whoosh, whoosh, just, 100 miles an hour, kids just winging these Bibles back at them, and I was like, man, why is this, how did this happen?
I remember we did a festival not long ago overseas. It was pretty much all dark metal bands, And Anthrax was headlining, And we were going on after Anthrax, which is always weird to me.
Oh yeah, they have the headlining band, and then they have like the later band as people are kind of either filing away or going back to the tents or whatever it may be. Right?
Exactly. And it was funny because Anthrax played, and there was a full house, outdoor festival. Full house. I think they went on like at 11:30 or midnight or something. We went on like at 1 a.m., 1:30. And it was like half of the crowd, poof, gone, you know? And that's a that's like a mental, oh my gosh.
And even the milder audience members aren't exactly doing backflips at the prospect of attending a glorified goddamn gospel concert.
A lot of people shy away from that, and they're afraid to play you on the radio or to show you on this video show or whatever. You know, every now and then someone might come up and say, great music, great show, great video. Love it all. I really don't know if I'm too much into the message.
Between the pristine Rob Halfordian multi-octave shrieks, Roger Taylor-esque rhythmic assault, and twin turbo guitar attack, if they'd poured over their lyrics and swapped out all the gods and Jesuses with Satans, Lucifers, or babies, they'd be bigger than Priest.
Enigma Records president, Wes Hine.
We're all sitting around the studio in the mixing room, and the lyrics are just booming through, listening very loud, and all of a sudden we hear, Jesus is the way. And I was there with somebody else, and we looked, and they said, are you Christians? And they said, yes. And immediately, my initial reaction was, oh no. I thought I had this perfect band. They're good-looking guys. Everything's for them. They've got the image, they've got the look, they're great songwriters, they're Christians. Oh no.
And for the record, I don't think they should change their message either. In a day and age where a procession of pretentious faux artistes dance lambada around the perimeter of their non-existent message and a cloying cash grab painstakingly engineered to be all things to all people, or whisper-singing indie rock shit stains who confuse ambiguity with artistry, however you feel about Christianity, organized or otherwise, Stryper, just nut up, middle finger aloft, and say,
hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
Boom! Like a fucking howitzer to the face. Uncompromising, unrepentant. Well, okay, maybe a little repentant. The point is, they give nary an inkling of a fuck, and that, my friends, is the apotheosis of heavy metal. In a sea of non-committal nutwipes, professing nothing, offending no one, and profiting in perpetuity thereby, I'll take a committed zealot over an amoral human fucking ringwraith any day, and you can just goddamn deal with it. Next.
Here to sing a song, the sing-along song from their new album, To Hell with the Devil, Stryper.
The band's most recent album is called To Hell with the Devil. You said earlier on that you don't actually like to preach, but you're definitely stamping that message home, aren't you?
Yeah. When people heard To Hell with the Devil, they weren't sure what to think. They weren't sure if we were swearing.
Right.
They weren't sure if we were saying, let's go to hell with the devil, or if we were saying, to hell with the devil. That's where we're supposed to be.
Priest had Screaming for Vengeance, except had Balls to the Wall, but only Stryper had To Hell with the Devil, the album that single-handedly consigned their detractorship to the trash compactor, vanishing in an aberrant puff of Aquanet. From the production to the songwriting to the musicianship, this is the definitive statement. After a belly full of brooding synthcraft followed by a fleeting moment of silence, Stryper tear into the 10-ton title track. Found it curious that arguably the two most infamous epic hair metal tracks, the first being Europe's The Final Countdown and the second being Stryper's To Hell with the Devil, were both unleashed on the heaving titties of the burgeoning female audience within mere months of each other and embraced a similar song structure, solo and sing-along chorus. But for my money, As much as I love Europe, Stryper's To Hell with the Devil takes the final countdown out back behind the woodpile and gives it a 12-gauge goodbye. But the album is lousy with hits, with only the faintest fart cloud of filler, the anthemic Calling on You, the monoliths of the MTV era that were honestly and free, sing-along song, and a whiplash thrasher by the name of The Way have remained staples of the band's repertoire well into 2017. But it's only after delving into the minds of Morian depths of the record that you hit on the true mithril vein. For my money, the best song in the ever-loving record is the soaring closer, More Than a Man.
No matter what some people say, all of your faith and your life will start to change.
I've said it so many times, it's bordering on a monastic chant at this point, but it doesn't make it any less true. Not all mandatory metal records live up to the hype. I can take or leave Number of the Beast. British Steel is inferior to both albums, fore and aft, but some albums are considered classics because that's precisely what they happen to be. To Hell with the Devil, from its majestic vibrato-laden vocals to its titanic twin guitar harmonies to the pounding power metal production job, is the living embodiment of that phenomenon. Most impressively of all, it's not merely guitar legend Oz Fox shredding the strings off his fucking guitar, but vocalist Michael Sweet, who bangs out some of the most impressive solos on this record and many fucking others. Christian, atheist, Satanist, or tobogganist, To Hell with the Devil is the sovereign ruler of your ass. Buy it! To Hell with the Devil was just a watershed, an album that launched not only Stryper, but the entirety of Christian rock to the commercial stratosphere. A dead-eyed note that the Christian music industry of today rarely acknowledges. No Stryper, no DC Talk, no Newsboys, no Switchfoot, but good luck getting CCM or the Dove Awards to throw the Yellow and Black Attack a bone. If Amy Grant wedged her cankled foot into the Christian pop crossover market, Stryper blew the door off its butt fucking hinges, blasting onto the top 40 charts with ease, the music videos for free, and honestly remained the #1 most requested videos on MTV for almost the entirety of 1987, and Calling on You peaked at #2. Presented with a fork in the road, the band weighed their options carefully. Down one winding, precarious path, the rolling plains of power metal, and down the other, the frigid peaks of payola.
People walk around every day with money in their pocket, and on that money it has the words, "In God We Trust." And so he felt that that was kind of a symbol of faith that people carried around unconsciously.
I looked at it and I thought the Stryper logo fits best in it.
You've been the subject of picketing, denouncement, and outright misinformation. How do you react to those who are your most vocal critics?
Well, I just kind of realize that I guess they feel they're doing the right thing. But, you know, by a lot of the people that a lot of people that have denounced us have now been denounced. And, you know, the Bible says, "Judge not lest you be judged." Don't point a finger, because if you do, a finger's going to be pointed back at you.
This voice of the dragon, that's what it is, has become so dirty, so damnable, so depraved, as it involves itself in so much drugs, illicit sex, and even demon worship. And today it's called, listen carefully, Christian rock music.
Television evangelist Jimmy Swaggart made a tearful confession before his congregation on February 21st, 1988, of unspecified sin.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
He stepped down from his pulpit. It was reported that Swaggart had paid a New Orleans prostitute to pose in the nude.
To discount In God We Trust as the band's most commercial record is to do it a goddamn disservice. From the complete obliteration of the bottom end to treble so high only fruit bats can hear the fucking record, it's apparent from the opening sting the band wanted to soften themselves, at least on the production side. But songwriting-wise, In God We Trust features some of the heaviest compositions in the Stryper discography, from the tandem guitar typhoon of the title track to the masterful metallurgy of the writings on the wall. But the baron of the bunch is without question guitarist Oz Fox's Japanese speed metal single, The Rain. It's interesting to note that longtime bassist, right here, Tim Gaines, was actually not featured on the recording of both this and the preceding album, with the rumors provided for such raging everywhere from the age-old artistic differences axiom to a reputed drinking problem Gaines himself has since admitted to. Whatever the reasons, the band enlisted Brad Cobb for the album, and then, I believe, Matt Hurek for Leatherwolf, even going so far as to slap him in spandex for the earliest photo shoots, before realizing it was a case of fire and holy water and showing him the rectory door. And in both cases, bafflingly, Tim Gaines rejoined the band for the subsequent tour. Maybe you just really like travel?
That was an odd situation and an odd time. I write about that in my book a little bit. Tim might write a book someday and have a different version of it, and I'm sure that'll happen. But I'll tell you what happened from my perspective. We wound up having a different bass player play on the album because we felt like Tim wasn't going to cut it quite like we wanted for the album, although he could have, and he's proven that point on recent albums.
But you didn't give him the shot even.
Exactly,
Gotcha.
Exactly.
He's just really quiet. For the first 2 years, we didn't know Timothy. That's how quiet he is. He just never talked. He's opened up. I mean, we knew him, but we didn't. You know what I mean? Because he just has a problem sometimes of not talking.
The perfect bassist. Inaudible. But as much as I love In God We Trust, hell, I own an original tour t-shirt, actually, of the album in question. Shout out to my boy Yell Chaos, by the way, for giving me this. It does have one lethal flaw in my eyes, and that is without question the bitch-tittied ballads. Previous records pandered without proselytizing. Honestly, is an anthem. First Love is legendary, but this shit?
Time seemed to pass me by. I found myself alone.
I'm saying this with all the respect in the world for Michael Sweet and his talent. That's a chick. And I don't mean the trite, hair metal so unflaggingly effeminate homily. I mean, if I peered beneath the half-pound of product, lifted up her taffeta skirt, and didn't see a slatch trap staring back at me, I'd demand a fucking DNA test. Never mind dude looks like a lady, dude fucking sounds like one. Dude sounds about 5 bottles into an estrogen regimen, in fact. Dude's a tummy tuck and a tit surgery away from giving live birth on stage.
People, interestingly enough, seem to really like that record. A lot went into it. We I think, overproduced it. We spent too much time on it and too much money, and it became kind of sterile, in my opinion. We lost some of that raw energy because instead of doing a guitar take 2 or 3 times and going with the best out of the 2 or 3, we would do it 50 times. And you just lose it. You lose the energy.
But saccharine diabetes ballads notwithstanding, In God We Trust is a beast and a half. But after a lukewarm reception, not to mention the slow death of hair metal at large by the late 80s, it was time to hit the reset button. But Stryper didn't merely hit it, they slammed that bitch. Twice.
You know, I'm at the point where I almost don't like that word ministry because it gets misconstrued so much of the time, and people say, well, you got a ministry, what is it? It's very simple. We're guys here to help the world believe in Jesus Christ. And and to the point where I want to take all the Christian lingo or the window dressing and throw it away. And just be real direct with people and say, okay, look, we do have a ministry. But a lot of times when people hear the word ministry, they think it's, Stryper's out asking for people's money and that type of thing.
How did you work through all of that without becoming bitter at the church?
No, we did have times where we became bitter.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it was tough. There were some hard times. We went through some periods where actually in 1990 where we actually kind of fell away because we were so burnt out by the Christian church. And
The 90s are destined to be years of radical change, socially, politically, and for the band known as Stryper, musically.
Stryper wants to come out of the box that we feel we've been put into. And we feel certain people have tried to put laws upon us and tell us how to be or how to do things or how to play our music. And that's not what Stryper's all about.
We wanted to go back, and kind of pick up where we left off, in the old days when we had like a real heavy edge.
I don't think I've ever encountered an album so simultaneously reviled and beloved as Stryper's soft reboot, Against the Law. Depending on who you happen to ask, opinions will vacillate manically from greatest album in the band's career to worst album ever, with nary a DMZ betwixt the two. But it's important to frame the record within its appropriate context. After ascending the golden staircase to hard rock heaven, they'd gone perhaps that one step too far into commerciality, and consequently stumbled a smidge, with record producers and money men gibbering in their ears, not to mention the televangelists and PMRC bludgeoning them with every Bible that wasn't nailed down.
What we have, we don't have the stickers on them, but we thought we'd be a little bit fun. Would you mind for a minute if we threw a couple out in the audience?
Go for break. And
Okay.
What do you think of that, Fred? I mean, the idea of throwing out
that's the Bible.
Yeah.
I just think it should be treated with reverence. This to me is the Word of God, and you believe in that. You wouldn't be even using it in your concerts.
Let me tell you something.
How about just having the ushers handing it out down the, put your hand up, you want a Bible, and hand it to them.
They're a bit heavier, Robert, so just be careful how you throw it. They're a bit heavier. Okay.
I just want to add, the words in this book are holy, not the pages it's printed on. This comes off a printing press.
Stryper at last acquiesced, with their personal lives in disarray after 7 years of uninterrupted touring and press humping. Who can blame them for throwing up their hands in unison and saying, fuck this Christian music bullshit, where every pastor's pariah, every thrash metal pissant's punchline, here's an idea, we're a rock band. How about we rock for a fucking change?
We just wanted to originally be a rock band who believe, we do believe in God and we follow God, but we just wanted to be a band. We love music.
And so Against the Law was born, a transparent attempt to secularize and modernize their music during the unceasing flux of the 1990s. A visionary move considering the flannel flood was still a year or two away. Stryper saw the writing on the wall, pun marginally intended, and moved to ameliorate the onset of musical stagnation, while most hair metal bands were face down in a groupie sledge trap, oblivious to the musical cataclysm to come. Normally this kind of pivot puts me off. Allow me to jeter for a moment into Anecdoteville. I remember when I was really into punk back in the day. I got into a thrash punk, hardcore punk, I suppose today you'd call it like power violence band called Lugnut. I dug the music, but the band happened to be Christian, like dragging their didactic, God-fearing phallus across your forebrain type Christian way the fuck out front with it. But when their second EP dropped, suddenly the band was all about rock and roll and partying and all manner of banal bullshit. Well, the fuckwits made the immortal mistake of printing their email address on, like, the inside of the CD, so I dropped them a dime to see what was up. Hey, what's the deal? You used to stand for something, now you're selling out and cashing in? The bassist, I think his name was Owen, hits me back. One day, he condescends, you'll understand how small-minded that comment is. Well, shit, fuck. On the offhand you're watching, it's 2017, I still think you're a bought-out bitch. Grow a dick and stand for something. And I can't pretend I don't get similar sellout vibes from Stryper here. Fortunately for them, Against the Law happens to be a damn good album. Thanks to the adoption of the CD format, it might be a hair on the long side, nearly 20 minutes longer than any record they released to that point, in fact, but when it hits, Against the Law puts you on your ass. Even the lead single, the eyebrow-raising but excellent Earth, Wind & Fire cover Shining Star, is a home run, and features some superb bass work by American Idol's Randy Jackson, by the by. And listing the production proficiencies of Tom Werman, best known to the Metal Mythos faithful for his work on Dawkins' Tooth and Nail, I believe, the album that also happens to sound superb. It's not all perfect, though. The ballads are once again as ubiquitous as they are unexceptional, but that, my friends, is why the Japanese invented the skip button. Just don't do the same to this album. Against the Law is a second-look dynamo, an experiment that failed, perhaps, but a killer hard rock and metal album by any reasonable metric. Don't believe the bullshit. Buy it.
But I just want to tell you, Stryper got burned out. For 8 years, you know, we took a beating, quite a beating, from mainly Christian people, maybe I should say so-called Christian people, who were just coming down on us, you know, and always saying that we were wrong, we were doing this wrong, we were doing that wrong, we needed to do this, we needed to do that. And that was kind of like our rebellious record.
Stryper had clearly lost their way by this point, not merely musically or visually, but most importantly personally as well. After a grueling tour playing to dwindling audiences and diminishing record returns, frontman Michael Sweet packed in the pajamas and called it a career. In his absence, guitarist Oz Fox, a sensational vocalist in his own right, picked up the gauntlet to finish out the tour. But in the longer term, with no viable replacements forthcoming, that was all she wrote, and for almost the entirety of the 1990s and half of the subsequent decade, that's precisely how it was. Until it wasn't.
There's a whole negative vibe on, you know, Michael Sweet leaving Stryper, and I don't want anyone to think that it's, you know, you don't have to look at it in a negative way. It's something I felt led to leave the group and do something on my own. Musically, I'm doing a little bit, you know, different style than those guys want to carry on doing.
If the fruit's on the tree, do you chop it down? If it's alive, do you kill it? I mean, Stryper's a Lazarus waiting to come back up. You know, I'm ready for it to happen.
I would suppose if we ever reunited, it has to be before we all lose our hair, right?
I've discussed the flux of the early 90s music industry on more than one occasion, but Stryper as a band were reamed with particular savagery by a record business that was soon to engage in a fair bit of self-immolation itself.
The people who were supposed to be paid by a record company weren't paid. Well, a little while later, you know, the marshals knock on the front door and I'm served with this piece of paper for $975,000 in debt. I get on my knees and I ask God for $1 million. Just to cover this bankruptcy thing. And $1 million check arrives in the mail about 5 days later. And all it says is, enjoy your gift. So I take it back, go down to the bank, I knew the manager of the bank, and I give it to her, and she said, it looks like it's good, it looks like it's drawn off some platinum account, and you know, the person's rich, but we gotta wait 10 days. So how do you think I feel for those 10 days? Okay, I'm like on edge. Thank you, God. This is awesome. 10 days later, the check's no good. And this was... And then, you know, from the skyscraper to the street, man.
At first soldiering on essentially without a band, drummer and founder Robert Sweet remained the sole survivor.
I'm sitting here, the Lone Ranger. I'm the guy that's left, okay? I'm sticking with the ship. Maybe the ship looks like it's going down, but it's not, okay? And I'm sticking with it because I feel that Stryper stands for something, and it's more than just songs.
But with the money men beaten at the back door and band members filing from the room, it was all but a foregone conclusion that Stryper would be sitting out the remainder of the 90s. I think Michael Sweet moved to Massachusetts and became effectively a park ranger. Oz Fox forklifted the fuck out of some boxes at a warehouse, and Tim Gaines shacked up with him for a side project called Sin Dizzy. But when the first annual Stryper Expo became a local hit, the band members reconstituted for a series of one-off reunions while Michael Sweet embarked on a solo career. And it was just that career that led to the creation of the record I hold in my hands, 2005's Reborn, the Stryper album and comeback that was never really intended to be either.
It was really a solo album.
Mm-hmm. It sounded like more of
it was.
Style, yeah.
It was a solo. It was an album that I did at my house, and then I played it for Oz. We did a gig down at Disney World, I think, and I played it for Oz, and he's like, "Oh man, yeah, I like this. This would be cool as a Stryper album."
Mm-hmm.
That's where it began.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so it was the quickest, easiest way to get a Stryper album out there.
Deliberately downtuned, bereft of solos, and modernized to merry fuck, it's no mystery why its reception wasn't slightly more affectionate. It even lacks original bassist Tim Gaines, who wouldn't return until 2013's No More Hell to Pay, I believe, his position in the meantime filled by Tracy Ferry for the duration, which isn't to say the result is dog shit. Taken for what it is, okay, Reborn's still pretty fucking awful, but not merely for its nu metal affectations, but for its schizophrenic composition. For every audio slave humping headbanger, no less than 3 ballads fresh off the assembly line seemingly made for Christian Top 40 radio. A fruitless pursuit considering Christian stations have never been enamored with a band that essentially gave them a fucking career to begin with. I have to admit though, with catchy chorus craft and power chords out the asshole, Reborn isn't outright unlistenable, it's merely misguided. The most apt analog to the album in question would probably be the Dokken album Hell to Pay. Decent for what it is, but mired as it is in a half-assed Audioslave imitation, not remotely similar to Stryper. What I find curious is that both albums dropped at the height of the classic heavy metal resurgence of the mid-2000s, yet seemed reticent in every way to sound anything the fuck like classic metal. Stryper were back, but their sound most certainly wasn't. Yet.
Reborn was more of our attempt at being modern. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we strayed from things that were so important, like guitar solo harmonies, high-pitched vocals, background vocals, things that people like to hear from Stryper. We didn't do. You know, we kind of put them on a shelf. So we got a lot of complaints. I think there were some really cool songs on that record, though. And I think the production lacked a little bit. I think Murder by Pride is definitely, we've gone back to our roots.
The comeback we clamored for, a modern metal masterclass, and in my opinion, the most underrated Stryper record by a mile. After a 5-year hiatus during which Michael Sweet stood in as the replacement for the recently departed Brad Delp of the AOR juggernaut Boston, he returned to Stryper visibly reinvigorated, making early pronouncements that the next album would be the Stryper you know and love, professing a return to twin guitar harmonics, operatic shrieks, and eyebrow-searing solos, and when 2009's Murder by Pride dropped, it did not disappoint. Easily my album of the year for 2009, and a staggering effort in every respect, right from the opening track, a slightly punkier affair with sort of a Van Halen edge, called Eclipse for the Sun. It's evident the intent is to attack, attack, attack. And a ballad or two aside, that's precisely what it does. Any fallibilities it suffers from, I would have to credit to it being recorded in the shadow of tragedy. In 2007, Michael Sweet's wife, Kyle, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, then miraculously, it seemingly evaporated. The Sweets shared their testimony on Christian television, breathed a sigh of relief, and Michael returned to tour with Boston.
All the symptoms of the cancer by my blood test and by my CAT scans were gone. Everything was gone.
Wow.
It was gone, yeah.
And then, in late 2007, it returned, spreading aggressively. What transpired next is a horror all too familiar, and after a valiant 2-year fight, his wife would ultimately succumb to her illness and pass on just 2 months before the release of this album, Murder by Pride. Mike was mum on the subject, and outside of the initial post, rarely addressed the subject, but the specter of his ordeal is evident on the lyrics of the album itself. I really can't recommend Murder by Pride enough. It's not a wholehearted ode to the 80s, but with one foot in the present and a firm acknowledgement to the past, it's the comeback Reborn should have been. More importantly, it started the band on an absolute rampage of relevant albums that continues unabated to the present. Murder by Pride is murder by metal. Get it!
Wanted to take a moment to share with you some incredibly exciting news for us, and I hope for you as well, and that is a brand new Stryper record. It's entitled No More Hell to Pay. It has that I feel we haven't achieved since the 80s, is that powerful energy that was accomplished on a lot of the old school albums that Stryper did back in 1986 and 88. We've somehow captured that again.
You know how I said Murder by Pride is a masterpiece, but it wasn't like the 80s? You remember how some of you bridled and moaned, but that's what I want? Well, wish granted, bitch tits, after a brief respite to crank out the exceptional compilation The Covering, which raised more than its fair share of Christian eyebrows by including Stryper's spectacular renditions of Black Sabbath and Judas Priest tunes.
I've heard some of the Stryper tracks. My friend Eddie Trunk has played it. They've done some really good covers, you know. And the thing I like about what Michael's done is that he's treated those songs with respect. You know, he's obviously loved those songs and wanted to put the Stryper twist to it, so I say thank you.
With the original lineup of Michael Sweet, guitarist Oz Fox, drummer Robert Sweet, and at long last bassist Tim Gaines reconstituted anew, No More Hell to Pay was a love letter to the 80s Stryper output, but not the power ballad pussery of I Believe in You. We're talking the seminal stomp of proto-power metal Soldiers Under Command era Stryper, and arguably, if I'm being perfectly objective, rose-colored spectacles calmly tucked in my breast pocket, it's a little better. More consistent, fewer forgettable ballads, a more direct, catchy, thunderous statement from a band that, much like Mythos luminaries accept, have a seemingly evergreen wellspring of worthwhile music to proffer to the adherents of the faith and faithless alike.
And it's a cool track. It's one of the more energetic tracks. It almost reminds me a little bit of a Motorhead. It's got a Motorhead vibe.
No More Hell to Pay is festooned with throat-throttling anthems, rarely if ever clocking in over 4 minutes, shorn of all flab and crafted to precision for maximum catchiness and metalliferous might. If it sounds like I'm singing the praises of how Stryper sings their praises, you're A1 fucking right. Next.
This album is definitely for the fans. It's a heavy album. It's got edge. It takes you back to the Stryper of old. You know, the yellow and black attack, Soldiers Under Command, To Hell with the Devil.
Pardon my sacrilege, but good fucking God! This album, as superb as its predecessors were and have, if anything, improved with repeated listens, Fallen is just that much better. More coherent, more polished, the performance is more pristine. This is effectively Stryper's very first full-tilt power metal record.
And the new album is really kind of got everybody going because we got this really cool song called Yahweh that just is epic kind of sounding.
I was flying and I wound up meeting for the first time, Clint Lowry of Seven Dust. And when I said, hey man, you know, I would love to hear some of your ideas, and he wound up sending me a couple ideas, one in which I really, really liked. I took that in a different tuning, Stryper tuning, which is half step below 440, Van Halen tuning, and I wound up making this out of what Clint sent me.
a power metal record. Fucky Photoshop cover art notwithstanding, sorry folks, real paintings are always gonna look better. There's a compelling argument to be made that Fallen is the finest effort in Stryper's storied career. The percussion has punch. Robert, who seemed perhaps slightly less invested on the previous album, is all the fuck in on this one, turning in a pounding performance, and his brother Michael Sweet continues to defy age and basic human anatomy by sounding as exceptional as he ever has in every single register. The twin solos he exchanges with Oz Fox scintillate from bar to bar, and even the bass work is worthy of mention, though perhaps I shouldn't be surprised given how often I agree with the man on Twitter. It's refreshing as fuck to have a metal artist call out politically correct propaganda in news and entertainment media as well, particularly when it comes through as thunderously as on Big Screen Lies. But the 10-ton tune here is without question the sensational title track, opening up with a great big glob of groove metal before launching into the most majestic metal fantasia in recent memory. Fallen is fucking exceptional.
It wasn't easy to get to this point because for a long time we all were butting heads about stuff and just getting it to this point.
Because
but right now,
united.
What's that?
United.
Yeah, getting united, and sometimes that's a hard thing.
Listen to it, buy it, cut a bitch if you have to, but fucking get this album. Which brings us to the end of our excursion into the savage tracts of Stryper, perhaps the most misunderstood chapter in hair metal's mottled history. Let's hope we dive-bombed some bullshit on today's program and converted many a prejudice because the band in question more than fucking deserves it. I'm Razor Fist, and as I melt back once more into the mists of the Mythos, I wish you God fucking speed.
I'll meet you back home. Whoa! Gotta put it in dry. See you later. People say I look like Boy George. I think that's a cut down. See, do I?
Oh, ooh, you do. Whoa.
Huh?
Oh, wow, gee.
I'll tumble for you.